What is your assessment today of the tech ecosystem? What is missing after all these experiences?
Yeah, I think first of all, foremost, we should talk about perhaps the strengths that we have. The gap between technology has been reduced significantly. So, for example, in the 90s, early 2000s, a mobile phone, when it was launched, it would take 6 months to come to Pakistan. I think what we're really missing is, in my opinion, is the openness and the legislative support that is required from the government of Pakistan.
What will enable founders to thrive? Is there like any one or two things that you think from your experience with the founders?
Founders will survive irrespective, because that's the nature of founders' entrepreneurial mindset, the grit that they have, the purpose, the passion, etc., etc.
What do you think that Pakistan has as a position in this MENAP region?
MashaAllah, Pakistanis are, in my opinion, hardworking, somewhat creative. We've had, organizations that have been created in Pakistan that have moved out of Pakistan. So, for example, Zameen.com, Rosie.pk, Park Wheels. These are organizations that have, been founded in Pakistan.
What is your ambition, and how do you see the tech ecosystem evolve in the next few years?
I think first and foremost, we've seen technology, and we will continue to see technology evolve. You talked about the mobile phone when it was just a mobile phone, right?
Right.
Today, it's everything. For everybody, we need to have some sort of a mentor or a coach, somebody who has done that before you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
So, for example, if you want to do something and you go to a mentor, maybe you can achieve that objectives that you want in 6 months rather than, let's say, 6 years. Maybe you can achieve it in a lot less cost than you can perhaps in other ways.
Waste a lot of money.
Correct. Time and money.
Welcome to this episode of Wasl Media podcast. I'm happy to have Parvez Abbasi, which is one of the monuments of the technology ecosystem, I will say, because he's been here for a long time. I know that you were born abroad and raised abroad and choose to come back one day in Pakistan. So please tell us a little bit of who you are and a little bit of the story, and then we'll try to deep dive.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Sarah. First of all, thank you for inviting me to your podcast. It's great to be here. Just to clarify, I was actually born in Murray, in the mountainous region. It's an hour's drive from here. It's a beautiful place, mashallah. But at the age of 1, my family emigrated to the UK. So I grew up in London, and I spent the first 27 years of my life in the UK, studying there with my family, with my siblings, with my friends, growing up in the UK, studying telecom engineering, and then ultimately starting work for British Telecom. And then in 1991-92, I decided to come to Pakistan. That's when the telecom revolution was starting. Because sometimes I ask myself that question.
Everyone has different reason. Faisal was having earlier different reason. I have a reason why I'm here. Yeah. What was the reason? I think years back.
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, in hindsight now, I have a much more clarity of perhaps what it was. Europe was fantastic, was great. Of course, it's my second home, but I still didn't feel like I was, that was home for me. Belonging. My parents always said, and we grew up with this, that one day we're going to go back home. So for them, mentally, home was Pakistan. But I think I just really wanted to have a change. I wasn't really satisfied with the life there. I had, God has been very kind. I had everything that you could wish for. But there was something missing. And two things happened. One was that there was a African-American TV program about slaves called Roots. And it was a very popular series at the time, where they traced back the African-American slaves all the way back to 300 years. And they were tracing their ancestry. So I was thinking about my ancestry. I didn't even know beyond my parents' siblings, Mamu, Chacha, Taya, and so on and so forth. I didn't know my cousins. I didn't know anything about my country. I didn't know anything about my family. So I wanted to, find out more. Yeah, I wanted to find out more about them. And the second thing was, unfortunately, my mom, she passed away in 1988 as well. So I didn't really, I felt the need to come back more and try to understand what was in her life, what was in my father's life. What were the reasons that, took them abroad, and why did they have so much love and affection for their own country? And I'm happy to share with you 30 years later or 35 years later, I'm getting to understand some of those answers now.
Oh, finally, after 35 years. Okay, and you've been into technology, you are an engineer yourself. First thing you started, it was around technology. You are one of the people who brought phones and contribute to this adoption of technology in Pakistan.
Yeah, I mean, it was a basic telephone, a mobile phone. So in the late 80s, when I was working in the UK for British Telecom,
right,
I had a passion for mobile phones. So I had a really big interest in mobile phones. And as I said, in those days, they were only phones just to talk to people.
Right.
So when Pakistan was starting, I saw it as a good opportunity to come here. And I had two things that were advantageous over the local people. One was I had a passion and understanding of mobile phones. And the second, I could speak reasonably good English. So that also was an asset, believe it or not, because a lot of the people who came were foreigners originally. So the CEOs tended to be European, British, American, etc. So we connected very well. And also having a background and understanding, like you mentioned, the technology gave me an edge of understanding the product better than just a regular salesman.
Exactly. And what was, I think, like it's a huge gap between the ecosystem back then, the technology ecosystem back then and today. If you can have like a little bit of insights of how you've seen this development happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, the old mobile phone, you could only talk to somebody. In fact, SMS was started later as well. Of course, the mobile phone has transitioned into what it is today. But I remember in the old days, they were very large. People could show off. It was a status symbol. Just to give you an example, if I was to call you, Sarah, let's say in the early 90s or mid 90s, I would phone you and tell you, Sarah, I'm calling from my mobile. Just to tell you that I have a mobile, right? Of course, we don't do that now because it's transitioned the other way. But I'm really happy that to see the development and to try to keep pace with the development as well. So I had the opportunity not just to help companies build their own networks in Pakistan, originally Instaphone, Paktel, and then Mobilink, but also had the opportunity to set up my own company working with brands like Nokia, Samsung, Motorola, and build handset distribution network across Pakistan as well. So I had the opportunity to work on both sides. And really, it was a passion for me. So I enjoyed every minute of it. It was tough. As you know, startups are very, very tough and you have to run around and do a lot of work. It's 24/7, 365. But as I said, it was very rewarding. I really enjoyed it and I made a little bit of money as well.
Thanks God. And from that perspective of like seeing it from end to end, you've been doing a lot of things after. Now you are having a startup studio. You are also helping build the future talent of Pakistan in different upscaling, rescaling. We were just like talking earlier. What is your assessment today of the tech ecosystem? What is missing after all these experiences?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we should talk about perhaps the strengths that we have. The gap between technology has been reduced significantly. So for example, in the 90s, early 2000s, a mobile phone, when it was launched, it would take 6 months to come to Pakistan before it was sold here. We wouldn't get that information because it would come through a magazine, etc. Today, things are much faster. So an iPhone, when it's launched in the US or in Europe, practically the next day it's available in Pakistan as well. So time has really been shortlisted. The second thing is technology awareness. With the use of 4G, 3G, Wi-Fi, people are very well connected. Through social media, young people, they're connected with the trends or the latest trends, I would say, that are going on in the world. So they're no longer that time gap. Young people, computer literate, fluent in English, they are able to access all of this information and all of this knowledge. So I think there's a really positive side to it. And then, of course, we have a very large young population. I'm not sure if you're aware, but more than 60% of our people are under the age of 30. So that's a huge opportunity. It's a threat as well, but it's a great opportunity if you look at it from that perspective. I think what we're really missing is, in my opinion, is the openness and the legislative support that is required from the government of Pakistan. So I think we can control things much better than we are doing it in current form. So for example, one one of the problems that you may hear in Pakistan is that the internet gets shut down. Now,
I was so shocked when it happened.
yeah, I mean, it should not happen. But having said that,
Not in 21st century.
correct. Having said that, we do have certain, let's say, security concerns, which I think can be better managed than shutting off, the entire network. Having said that, I think there are also solutions. For example, people who are working abroad, people who are providing services, they should be whitelisted so that you don't switch them off. If you have to switch people off, don't switch them off. At least they can continue to do their work. So it could be, for example, this building could be whitelisted and the internet will never be shut off, for example, in this particular building. So that's one way of looking at it. I'm trying to balance the two because we do have certain challenges as well.
Yeah, there is some challenge from other side.
The second thing is that I think there are many government policies, and I'm talking about startups in particular because since 2016 I had the opportunity to work with startup founders and understand what their challenges are. And I think that there are many good policies that are already enacted, whether they're in Silicon Valley, whether they're in Europe or even in the Middle East. We should try to copy them, customize them to our local culture and adapt them. So one of the things that I think the British government, for example, is doing really well is the tax benefit that they give to investors. So, Sarah, I don't know if you know, but in the UK, well, anywhere in the world, startups' failure rate is very high. So there's a 90% chance typically of startups to fail.
Right.
Now, if that's the
And
case...
it's even worse in the emerging market, I think. No?
Possibly. I mean, our experience at the National Incubation Center was actually the reverse.
Okay.
The reason being is that I think Pakistanis, once they do go through that process, they tend to be a little bit more harder working, more resilient, they have a little bit more grit, and therefore their chances of success are higher. But having said that, I think that the government policy in the UK is that if you invest in a startup, let's say you invest £10,000 and that startup fails and you lose your money, then out of that £10,000, you can claim up to 5,000 in one scheme and up to 7,500, 8,000 in another scheme. So against your future tax liability. So let's say,
interesting.
Yeah, let's say I lose the money in 2024, 10,000, but out of that 5,000 to 7,000 I can claim as a tax rebate in 2025. Now that gives me an incentive that rather than just wasting my money, why not invest in a startup? There are two benefits to Pakistan. One is, of course, that you will have more investment in the startup ecosystem, but more importantly, I think that will widen the tax net. So people who are currently not in the tax net or not providing the right information with regards to their taxes would probably be more interested in investing in startups, and therefore to avail this amnesty scheme or this scheme, they would be able to register with the local government.
So please, if you are hearing us, maybe something to implement very soon, because I know the Pakistan that are really working on having people pay taxes.
Correct.
And they are really struggling with that.
Correct.
There's a lot of black economy.
Correct.
So maybe
as I said, this
that can play in both.
Correct. So it has dual advantage.
Dual advantage, right?
I think one of the other strengths that we have is our diaspora Pakistani community members. We have 15 million people of Pakistan origin living outside of Pakistan.
Just 50?
15.
Oh, 150.
No, 15 million.
15? For me, I would think that there's as much Pakistani abroad that's Pakistani inside the country.
No. It's less than, what is it? Not even 10%. So that's 6-7%.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's why you'll see much more prevalent Pakistanis. For example, in Saudi Arabia, we have 3 million there. We have 1.5, 1.6 million in the UK, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
But what they do have is, apart from the money that they have in dollars and dirhams and rupee and pounds, etc., they also have an intellectual knowledge as well. They also are very well connected. Many of them are working in good positions in organizations. Just to give you an example, I was talking to somebody a couple of years ago who was working for a very well-known brand telecom company as the CTO there. And he said that, Parvez, we do a lot of outsourcing. A lot of our outsourcing goes into our neighboring countries. As a Pakistani, I would love to bring that home, but I can't bring that home because we're struggling with the government and certain challenges that we have. So I think really the government creates that openness, that facilitation, that support, create the policies that would actively incentivize people to come back. And just as you mentioned, Faisal was here earlier, myself, we know many other Pakistanis who have been born and lived abroad and grew up abroad and still have interests abroad, but they are looking towards Pakistan. And I can tell you, for every person that I already know that has shifted here, there are at least 10 more people who want to do it. And on our part, we help them by giving them, a better understanding of the landscape, the registration process, etc., etc. But if the government could do that more supportively, we'll have more people coming to Pakistan.
Because actually people are lacking the knowledge. In Morocco, it's happening the same. We have a lot of our talented diaspora. It's outside of the country. But people can just keep thinking of coming back for 10 years and they won't do it because they don't have the right knowledge or
Correct.
the right incentives.
Correct.
And I think Pakistani are the same. It's
also local. I think having a local partner, and I say that in the broader sense. So I know many people have had problems in Pakistan by coming to Pakistan, and that's because they haven't really been planning themselves properly. So they come here, they meet their relatives. Their relatives, they have the best of intentions, I'm sure, for them. However, they don't have the necessarily skill set, experience, competencies, network
exactly.
to do something in, for example, AI or IT or cybersecurity or something else for that matter.
And they will just find themselves lost, and
Correct.
then they will come back to the
Correct.
country from where they came from. And
Correct. So they lose their time, they lose their money, they lose their effort, they lose their interest, and they have to go back. And when they go back, they tell 10 people, I had a bad experience, so, those other 10 people would not go. Yeah, exactly.
About regulations and policy, just an infrastructure, as long as you've been now in the ecosystem for a while, what will enable founders to thrive? Is there any one or two things that you think from your experience with the founders?
Founders will survive irrespective, because that's the nature of founders' entrepreneurial mindset, the grit that they have, the purpose, the passion, etc., etc. But I think more founders will survive, and it'll be easier for them to survive if the government creates that environment which is conducive and supportive. And I think that has a lot to do with, for example, our education system, our social network. Families pressurize young people to get jobs, to become doctors, to become engineers, become accountants, etc. So I think positioning entrepreneurship as a career choice, I think that's great, one option. Second thing is that the government, as I mentioned earlier, has done a good job in creating the National Incubation Center program, where across the country, young people can come in for up to a year, and they can use a free of cost co-working space with high-speed broadband internet access, as well as access to domain experts, mentors, and even angel investors, VC funds, grants to allow them to go to Dubai for GITEX or Saudi Arabia for LEAP, and other activities and areas where they can demonstrate their products and services to a global audience.
Right. And talking about global audience and regional market, what do you think that Pakistan has as a position in this MENAP region?
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 things that come to my mind. One is, as I mentioned, that mashallah, Pakistanis are, in my opinion, hardworking, somewhat creative. We've had organizations that have been created in Pakistan that have moved out of Pakistan. So, for example, Zameen.com, Rosie.pk, Park Wheels. These are organizations that have been founded in Pakistan. You may be aware that some of the founders of Pakistan have not actually registered their companies in Pakistan, but have gone global by registering their companies outside of Pakistan. Kareem is, of course, one example of this. So I think that if we look at it from a regional perspective, Pakistan talent could be used by countries which don't necessarily have such a large population. So, for example, Kuwait, Qatar, they have the resources, but they don't necessarily have the manpower. And I'm talking about the intellectual manpower. And I think, again, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, other countries have done a good job in attracting foreigners, especially from Europe and other countries, which is great. But I think the cultural benefits that Pakistanis can get from being within the region, the cultural similarities, the religious similarities, I think that's an advantage, one. Second thing is focusing on the community and their needs. So, for example, there are 3 billion odd Muslims around the world, and they have certain requirements that perhaps they could be focused on in creating solutions and services around that. For example, women in makeup, for example, just to give you an example, there are many companies that are going in that particular space. Travel and tourism in a Sharia-compliant, halal, ethical way, for example. In Pakistan, for example, and I'm sure the world over, we're seeing a rise of Sharia-compliant financial services. Fintech. So I think Pakistan could play a very important role. As I said, we have a very strong tech understanding and backbone. So our engineers are very good at developing those solutions, and they can either be developed here in Pakistan as a back-end office, relatively lower cost, or these people can go to Dubai, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and provide those services to them there. So I think the cultural element, the religious element, the technology element that we have, and because we're a brotherly nation, no? A lot of similarities, not just with these countries, but also, for example, in Egypt. Egypt, I think you may have noticed there are certain startups coming from Egypt to Pakistan.
Right.
And vice versa, we can take some of our startups from here to Egypt.
Definitely.
Because of the market similarities there.
Definitely, yeah, there's a lot of similarities. I've been to Egypt in November and I've seen that it's the same problem, big population. And for example, in fintech, there are a lot of underbanked population. Pakistan and Egypt is almost the same. And this is why we are trying to build this platform, like this media platform, to really be able to create that knowledge that will help entrepreneurs navigate within the ecosystem and understand, because still like we can be one hub, but still like the economy are a little bit different in every country. Pakistan is not like Saudi Arabia, it's not like Algeria, it's not like, and the idea is like to be able where we can find some common places to act upon it. I wanted to have your point of view in terms of the startup studio you've built in. What is the model, and also how it closed some gaps in the current ecosystem?
Thanks very much, Sarah. You know, in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, we say fail fast, fail often, and through the failure we are learning. Right. And one of the things, again, during the National Incubation Center around 2018-19, we wanted to build our own startup. So we identify problems in a particular industry, whether that industry is the banking industry, the telecom industry, the pharmaceutical, and so on and so forth. And what we do is we pick out professionals from that industry and bring them together and try to find a solution for that particular industry using technology, IT.
Right, exactly.
So it seems like a little simple model, right? Now, we started this process and we were gaining traction. But what we found was that after about 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, people started leaving, maximum 7-8 months.
Okay.
And the reason why they left was because they didn't have enough income, because as a startup, you know, it takes 2 years, 3 years before you start making money. So they couldn't run their expenses, household expenses, kitchen expenses, so they left. So this was the problem, and we were struggling with this problem. And then I happened to go to Silicon Valley and had the opportunity to meet many different founders there. And there was a gentleman who actually gave me this idea about one of the startup venture studios in the Valley, where this gentleman, he was a biomedical scientist.
Right.
And about 25 years ago, in 2000, he sold his company for about $25-30 million. And then he used that to build a studio where he hired other biomedical scientists, PhDs, and he gave them a salary. So he took care of their monthly expenses and he gave them 10% equity. And this was the solution to our problem.
Okay.
And by the way, that particular company developed the Moderna COVID vaccine, which was $1 billion valuation. And the guy who got 10% equity, he got $100 million.
$100 million.
Yeah. So we're running that.
It's not bad.
So we learned the lesson. We brought the lesson back home. And today now, mashallah, we have people working with us. And we use the same model where we give them equity. We try to find ways of supporting them through other income sources like training, development, etc. So we help them to run their kitchen, but we also give them equity so that they don't have to worry about running their kitchen, one. And secondly, if there's an upside, as you know, they'll make a lot of money. And it's a purpose, it's a passion. They come from that industry, they come from that background. So it works well for both of us.
It's a problem in all the emerging market. You don't have that third wheel if you don't have any revenue, unless you have like some, I don't know, family support, or maybe your wife, I don't know, or your husband who's supporting you, so you can go along with that entrepreneurial journey that like at least 2-3 years to get out of the water. And in Morocco, the government has started doing this in this year to give 2 years salary. Nice. 2 years, 70% of salary.
Nice.
To encourage people to go into entrepreneurship. But of course, you should have like a real project going
For sure,
on
for
and
sure.
starting like the company and has done all the administrative things, and you can apply to this 70% of salary for 2 years till your company is like making
Excellent.
a little bit of money. Maybe.
I think it's a great idea, and many companies are now reaching out to us. Many institutions are reaching out to us
Right.
to use this particular model because they want to have. The other benefit is that some organizations, they want to retain the majority of the idea, the IP, and control. Whereas typically, if they're only buying 10% equity or 15% equity, they don't have that control. This allows them to reverse the situation by putting their money where their mouth is.
And also there's this mindset of like it's better to have a small piece of a pie, just like have a pie that doesn't
Correct.
has any value.
Correct. But also in the back of your mind, you know that, look, I'm not going to compromise my wife, my children, my home, etc. At least they'll be having a reasonably good income. You know, you don't have 100%, but even if you have 70%, you can still take care of the bare necessities of life, right? And I think that's enough for a founder to be able to then focus on all their time and energy and thought on developing that startup.
And to wrap up a little bit, how do you see, what is maybe your ambition in the tech ecosystem? Because I see that you're still working, you're still very active in doing a lot of things on the national level. What is your ambition, and how do you see the tech ecosystem evolve in the next few years?
I think first and foremost, we've seen technology, and we will continue to see technology evolve. You know, you talked about the mobile phone when it was just a mobile phone, right?
Right.
Today, it's everything. You know, there's a camera, there's a wallet, there's a entertainment, there's education. Everything is in the mobile now, and that's fantastic. We've seen that evolution. So I think the continuous development of technology, and I don't want to use the word AI because, of course, it's a buzzword, but I think AI is going to be in everything. It's just going to be like IT. So that's definitely a given. I think also what we're trying to do is inculcate that knowledge and what we call the entrepreneurial mindset into people. Now, either you're a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old person. What I would like to think is that deep down inside you, there is that person who wants to do something innovative, creative, and improve the quality of people's lives, make the world a better place.
Right.
But you may not know how to do it yourself because of the challenges that you face of rent and salary and job and so on and so forth. So what we do is we try to sit down with you and try to understand, because I genuinely believe that each person has a special superpower, a gift from God that unfortunately most people don't really use or realize. Just like your thumbprint is unique to you, similarly your power is unique to you as well, your superpower. So what we try to do is we help people identify their superpower. We help them, we call it talash karna or tarash karna. So we find it and we help you to polish it.
Oh, okay.
And then we leave you to yourself to make the world a better place. And basically, you know, that's what we're doing, and we love doing that. We've seen some really good results. People enjoy it, they like it. It's changing communities, and we'll continue to do that.
Amazing, because these talents can be like either future entrepreneurs or really good employees in some startups and companies.
Correct. As I mentioned earlier, you know, there are two types of people. There are people, for example, at university graduates who want to get a job, and I encourage them to get a job because they can learn on somebody else's expense rather than spending their own money. And then there are other people who want to get out of a job and basically start up their own business. And there are other challenges that they face. So in both of those scenarios, whether you want to get a job, we can help. Whether you want to start up your own business, again, we have experience and teams that can help people do that.
Amazing. Any last advice that you will give a new entrant to the market, wannabe entrepreneur, a first-time entrepreneur, which you will give him as maybe an underrated sometimes advice, but you feel is like really relevant?
Yeah, no, just two things I would say, Sarah. One is that for everybody, we need to have some sort of a mentor or a coach, somebody who has done that before you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
So, for example, if you want to do something and you go to a mentor, maybe you can achieve that objectives that you want in 6 months rather than, let's say, 6 years. Maybe you can achieve it in a lot less cost than you can perhaps in other ways.
Waste a lot of money.
Correct. Time and money. So I think finding the right person, and that could be in your own community, it could be in your college, in your neighborhood, in your organization, there are people who are 2-3 years ahead of you, and just go talk to them.
Yeah, not too far.
No,
Because
not
actually,
too far.
when it's too far, you cannot connect because you don't understand what they are about.
It's interesting you say that. So some of our seminars, we used to bring in the CEOs for the students, right? And there was such a big gap, they couldn't understand, they couldn't relate.
They identify, yeah.
But when we
themselves.
brought in people who had, let's say, 3-4 years of experience, they could connect. Like 5 years ago, I was a student. Now I'm and this is how I got here, right? So that's one thing that I would really encourage people, especially the younger people.
Right.
Find a mentor, find a domain expert, find a coach. Go and look for those people and spend time with them, and be open to supporting them as well. The other thing I would also encourage you, Sarah, taking the opportunity of this platform, is that the synergies that we talked about within the region, I think that perhaps we could create some sort of a hackathon where we open up problems and then we try to find solutions, but we encourage people to have members of at least 3 countries. Because in that diversity, we have a Pakistani, we have, let's say, Saudi Arabia, Egyptian, and so on and so forth.
Right.
That will allow us to have different backgrounds, different understandings, and come up with creative solutions that perhaps I could not ever imagine in my life, based on diversified experiences, diversified cultures.
I would love to. Let's do it. We'll work on it. Thank you very much, Parvez, for sharing this experience. I think that there is many insights that will help and be eye-opening for the audience that will listen to us. Thank you again for being here. I know it's the end of the day in a Ramadan day, so it's not very easy. And I'm in my 4th recording today, and you have been in a long day also. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Sarah, and peace and blessings on this special blessed month of Ramadan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.